Hey everyone, Teresa Aker here from Success Diaries with Teresa Aker. It's my privilege today to introduce you to Ingrid Dutton. How you doing, Ingrid?
I'm doing great, Teresa. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming today, Ingrid. Ingrid is a nurse practitioner at Chattanooga Heart Institution, and I wanted to talk to her about her heartfelt story, about how she arrived here. We're going to talk about her journey. Let's start at the beginning, Ingrid.
Okay, sounds great. So, I want to give a little bit of a background just because I think that does play into what how everything affected me later. So, my story of adversity is not one that I was born with or any kind of a childhood fear. It was one that happened later in life following what I felt was a great childhood. It was full of love and success. I had, done well in school, went to college right after high school, graduated with honors, and I was on my way to create this beautiful life that I had planned for myself. And what I was missing was a partner. And I met this man who came into my life who wasn't available at the time, and we were just friendly with each other. And maybe about 6 months down the road, he was available and he verbalized interest in me, and we started off slowly as friends, and he seemed to mirror everything about me. He had the same interests, the same dislikes, and even some of our vulnerabilities seemed to match up so perfectly well. And when I would tell him about my vulnerabilities or my insecurities, he would minimize them and say, that's crazy. You're this incredible person. And he would build me up, what you would expect out of a partner. And it was just over time, things began to change. And those vulnerabilities he actually ended up using against me. So if there was one of the things that I would always think is like, I feel like everybody has such high expectations of me and they think that I'm smarter than what I am. And before it was like, that's insane. Like, look at what you do, look at what you know. But then it turned into, they actually have a pretty good point. I'm not really sure you should have the position you have, or they should think this highly about you, or things like my appearance. If I were worried about how I looked, so the size I was, if I was pretty enough, things like that, where again, before he would build me up, but then it's like, you are a little heavy and you're not as pretty as her. Or he would talk about other women and how beautiful and everything was, just enough that if you took those isolated incidents, you could maybe brush them off, which is what I tried to do. But they became consistent enough. And then a word that I just recently started using, it began to erode at my self-worth and my own opinion about myself. And then I just kind of became confused because I thought perhaps there was something that I did wrong or that I am doing wrong to make him all of a sudden start treating me differently. And I, instead of, you know, realizing that it was him, I tried to change myself and work on myself to become this person that he used to love. And over time, things escalated as they typically do in these kind of relationships. And the verbal and the emotional abuse began to worsen, and it did escalate into physical and more than physical abuse. And at that point, I was already had become just a shell of the person I had been before, that I no longer had any self-confidence. And I didn't tell anybody about it because it was humiliating. Like you said, I'm a nurse practitioner. I had education in domestic violence. And while I never worked directly with domestic violence, I had the annual competencies that I had to do. So I knew what kind of a situation I was in, but I couldn't figure out how to get out because while I understood the circumstances, I was still clinging on to the hope that there was, this guy that I met, this man I fell in love with.
Yeah.
And, he had verbalized to me before that he felt like he had been abandoned by previous people in his life and he was never really loved. And so I didn't want to be one of those people that abandoned him. I planned on sticking with him. So it was just a very confusing time. And a common term that people use is walking on eggshells. And that's what it became, where I would monitor my own behavior to avoid any repercussions from him. And I began to try to predict his behavior based on things I said, things I didn't say, or things I did, or things I didn't do. And at first, I had kind of a cycle that I was able to follow, and I knew this would keep him calm. But then it just became more erratic. And that's part of what happens, and it keeps the victim off balance and unsure. And it was, I just did not know what to do. I knew I had to get out. I didn't know how. I didn't know when, and I knew things could potentially get bad. And they did. They escalated into an evening that I don't have to give the details, but it was the worst evening of my life. And I did believe that my life was in jeopardy after that night. And I realized at that point that it's stay here and try to work on this, or, save my own life. And I did get out of the relationship. And within the first couple years, I thought I was okay. Because I had like created this bubble around myself of I'm good now. I'm out. I'm free. I get to do what I want to do. And um, I believed that. I really believed I was okay. I had gone to therapy briefly, and I thought that was enough. But then things started to kind of crack for me. It's like this bubble that I had put around myself started to crack, and friends would say something or do something without any ill intention, but I immediately went into like this defensive mode, like, well, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? And I realized that I started to not trust others around me because I wasn't healed yet, and I wasn't okay. I had these buried triggers inside of me. And so I went back to therapy, and we worked on that a lot for a very, very long time for me to recognize what had been going on. Um, a few years ago, I started, excuse me, a podcast because, pardon me again, sorry about that.
Okay.
Um, as I started opening up to the closest friends I had around me about what had happened, I was met with that sounds like my story, or that happened to me too, or that is happening to me right now. And I didn't recognize how prevalent that domestic violence was until I started talking to these friends. And then I remembered how alone I felt. And that's one thing that abusers do is they'll isolate their victims either physically, like let's go move somewhere where you don't know anyone, or they begin to cut off your interactions with friends or family
Mhm.
to create this like isolated world for you.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. And I remember being surrounded by people that loved me, friends and family that loved me, but I still felt so alone and lost. And I decided that if I felt that way and I knew what was going on, I can't imagine how other people must feel. So I decided to start a podcast and share stories. And I've brought on different guests and advocates as well to help, one, for other victims and survivors to understand that they're not alone, and to understand that there is hope, there is a way out. If I did an episode on Tina Turner, if she can make it out and she can create this like amazing world that she did, others can get out. She left with 36 cents in her pocket, and she created this amazing icon of herself. So I wanted people to not feel alone. I also wanted to give an opportunity for those lucky individuals who have never had any interaction with somebody that's known domestic violence, or if they've never known domestic violence themselves, to have an opportunity to understand that a victim can't just leave, that there are reasons that they are tied to their abuser. It could be financial or, scared physically of, this person could find me. And a lot of times they do. Um, there are individuals who have children involved as well. And that holds them back. And if there's no like actual tangible reason, there is something called a trauma bond where the person is emotionally connected to their abuser. And it's difficult for people who have never been exposed to it to understand that anybody would stay in that situation. Um, and it's, a lot of people think that they victim blame, it's, well, maybe it's that person's fault that, they had this opportunity to leave and they haven't, or that person's making him or her mad because it can happen to men and women. It does happen to men and women. So I created this podcast a few years ago, and initially when I started it, I still had a lot of resentment built up inside of me that I didn't realize. And, I didn't start it as a way of getting revenge or bad mouthing my abuser because I will never even identify who that was.
Mhm.
But it was for myself. And through the years that I've done it, I've grown so much. So even the healing that I actively was working on in therapy and just talking with friends, doing the podcast has helped me recognize so many things about myself, and it's helped me recognize other things about other people. And one of the issues, I guess you could say, that weighed me down so much was wondering why he did what he did and wondering why abusers are the way that they are. And it consumed so much of me. And wondering, well, was it just me? Is it going to happen again with this next person? Or, what? But then I came to the realization that what they do, what whatever brought them to the point where that's who they chose to be, that's them. And to focus more on myself and focus on the betterment of myself and trying to help uplift others uh, at the same time.
Thank you for sharing your story first, Ingrid. So I would say so many people have been through what you've experienced to different degrees, but definitely have
Mhm.
experienced that. And I agree with you. A lot of them do not know how to get out. They don't know. In fact, I think some of them are so confused. They don't even know they're in that relationship.
Yes.
As you said, a trauma bond. They may be coming from their own backgrounds and their own trauma that they've faced already as a young person, and then go into these relationships and absolutely vulnerable. What was interesting to me, if we could circle back,
Yeah.
I've had different wonderful people on like yourself, and some that are relationship experts and have talked about things like narcissism and
Hmm.
uh, post-traumatic stress disorders, things like that, where the person that's actually in that situation, the abusive person, if you will, whether it be emotionally or physically, they are coming from usually their own trauma as well. So
Hmm.
what they take as being perhaps holding on to their partner, they think is love. It actually is not. And the partner who's holding on does also think it's love, receiving not love. So
Yes.
my question to you is, as you were going through it, you're a nurse, and as you said, you felt like you should know the signs, but you didn't. When you mix love into it, I think that's 100% of the issue at the beginning. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I would say that, I mean, I guess one of the things that confused me where I got so fixated was, did he ever love me? Or was this just an attack? And another problem I had was, did I actually really love him? Because I looked at myself, I'm an educated, independent woman. I would never, I was for sure one of those people that said I would never end up in a relationship like that. If anybody ever mistreated me, I would get out. But the problem is you don't see, and I'm stealing this from a quote from one of the individuals I did an episode on, but I didn't see the red flags at first because, or I didn't see the red flags because there was love at first.
Right.
There's love. It's all love. And there's all these bad things that happen, but then there's also good things. It's not just all bad all the time.
So I agree with you. So they tend to cling on to the good things, the good times, and think,
Mhm.
oh, it's just a time or a mood or something he's going through or she's going through, whatever the case is. You're
Yes.
absolutely right. And as you go through it, you're perhaps love bombed in the beginning, and you've got showers of gifts and showers of love and showers of all this. So you emotionally fall into that, and then you're attached to that person, that trauma bond that comes in there. And now you're thinking, I'm going to help them. I'm going to heal them, whatever
Yes.
they're going through, because you're probably a bit empathetic and an empath
Hmm.
on your own self. So now you try to do that and it's not working and you don't know why. And I think because you can't see it from their direction, because you don't think the same way they do. So all
Hmm.
of those things combined leave for a very vulnerable situation. But I'm very proud of you for making it through all of that. So we should
Thank you.
say that. So let's talk about people who are going through it now. What advice would you have for someone who is in it and does not know how to get out? I know there's abuse shelters, there's things like that, which are imperative for families, for people with children. But do you have advice outside of that that you could help?
Yeah, so that's definitely, I would say, the first step I would say is to contact a domestic violence center. There's the national in the United States. There's a national domestic violence hotline. There are a variety of those hotlines available in other countries as well. And find someone you trust. Find someone that you can confide in because I did have one. I had two colleagues that I could confide in, and they. This is a bit of an embarrassing story. One of them told me, I have this therapist I would love for you to talk to. And I said no, because I know once I do that, that person's going to give me the tools I need to leave. And I'm not ready to leave him yet. And that was, that's back to the love. Like I loved him. I'm not ready to let this go.
Right.
And so I would find somebody that you can confide in.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes that's hard to do because in order to do that, then you have to talk about this person that you love like they're a monster, and you have to give these details, and it's really hard to start telling those truths because you're still trying to hold on to that lie, which, I mean, that's what it is, this lie that you're going to get back to where you were. So it's hard to do that. It's also hard to find somebody that you feel is going to believe you. And I think that's one of the scariest things because typically these abusers are not this monster outside of your house. They're usually a very charming, charismatic individual that everybody gravitates to. So now you're trying to say, like, that person hurts me.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to find people that will believe it. But find someone. And if you can't find someone, you need to get it out somehow. So, like, I feel like mentally writing down what's happening to you, if you can't recognize that it's abuse, uh, to write down your story, either mentally or on a piece of paper, and then burn it so nobody sees it. But tell that story and then read it from a different point of view. And it helps you recognize, because this is something I had done. I was like, that poor woman. And then all of a sudden I recognized, oh, that's me. That woman is me that went through all of that. Was me that all those things happened to. And read it and look at it and wonder, what would I tell this person to do? And
That
I
that's
mean, there is yeah. Other like practical things is to have a bag packed, an emergency bag, because the abuse escalates, it always escalates. And you may think that you're okay, but then you'll know, you'll have a gut feeling. I want to say I feel like every individual describes a gut feeling that something bad is on the horizon. But so have like a bag packed, stash it away somewhere that your abuser won't find it, because, that will be um, an issue too. And then financial abuse is a real thing, and find a way if you can to hide a little bit of money here and there, to have a secret account if you can have a secret account. And just when the time is right, you will know your last straw. I mean, I was in this relationship for way longer than I should have been, but I wasn't at the right point. And looking back, I wish I would have left earlier, but I also think that if I would have left earlier, I probably would have gone back. And that's something common. 7 times is the average that a person returns to their abuser. So you'll know when your last straw is happening. And the main thing, 2 points is, don't tell your abuser you're leaving. I made that mistake, and I'm lucky because the risk of homicide increases by 75% from the time somebody says they're leaving and those initial 2 weeks. So if you plan on leaving, it needs to be a secret. Do not tell your abuser. And when you leave, stay gone. If you're able to do it successfully, don't go back.
Thank you so much. That is incredible, incredible advice. Thank you so much. It's so dangerous to get to that point. And I'm in Canada, so we certainly have reach out centers. And of course, you have the police and different security that you can reach out, but it isn't as easy sometimes. And I understand that. I commend you for everything you've done, where you've come and helping other people. Thank you so much for your advice, because Ingrid, a lot of people really don't know what to do. And it all comes back to insecurities and not knowing what way to go. And when someone can kind of guide them and shine the light on where they can go, it does help. And we'll
Mhm.
make sure that all of those places are in the show notes. I want to ask you about your podcast. What is the name of your podcast?
It's called 1 in 3, and it's the number one, IN, and then the number three. And
Okay.
I named it that based on statistics. So if you don't mind, can I give those quick?
Of course.
Okay. So the Centers for Disease Control says that 1 in 3 American men will experience sexual violence, intimate partner violence in the form of sexual violence, stalking, physical violence within their lifetime. So 18 years and above. And then the World Health Organization states that 1 in 3 women will experience physical violence or sexual violence by a partner, or sexual violence by a non-partner within her lifetime.
Wow.
And yes, it's an incredible amount. And I want to point out, I never reported my abuse to anyone. So those statistics are actually much worse
Is that
than
because of shame or just you weren't ready?
I was not ready. Well, it was actually a few things. I knew that if I reported him, that he would have repercussions. He'd have legal repercussions, potentially repercussions with his career. I was also afraid because things had gotten to be so physical that I truly was fearful for my life. And I was worried that if there was a bad night and I called the police, they come, they take his statement, they come and take my statement as, him versus her.
Yeah.
And even if they took him and said, we're going to take him and arrest him for however long, he doesn't stay in jail, and I could get a restraining order. And I was afraid. I was like, that's a piece of paper. This man can go through a piece of paper. And so there was legitimate fear. And I know there are things put in place to keep victims safe, but it's still a fear, a real
I
fear.
I understand that, Ingrid. Absolutely. I absolutely understand it. And for your being able to open up about your story and help other people is amazing. Honestly, it's amazing. And I'm glad you're doing a podcast that can help them as well. So we'll make sure that your podcast is in the note. If
Okay,
somebody
thank you.
wanted to reach out to you right this moment, what's the best place to reach you, Ingrid?
Probably my email, and I will respond to every and any email. And my email, it's the name of the podcast. So it's 1in3podcast@gmail.com. So it's numbers, the number one, IN, the number three, podcast@gmail.com.
Perfect. I'll make sure that's also on here. Do you have a YouTube channel or anything like that?
I do. To be honest, I think it's 1in3. I used to have it under
That's
Ingrid
okay.
Dutton, but I believe I switched it to 1in3. And I have a website that has links to all the different players, and it has a link to the YouTube as well.
What's your webpage?
That one's easy too. Is
Okay.
1in3podcast.com.
Okay, good. So
Yeah.
I'm going to make sure all of that's on here. Ingrid, I
Okay.
am so grateful that you came on today. And I wonder down the road if you would come back and do another episode.
I would love to. I really appreciate you having me on. I would absolutely love to come back on.
Honestly, I'm very grateful that you were here. And if people have questions, or we can bring up some other things that we can talk about after you've left and how you can rebuild your life, I think you'd be the perfect person to help people start to rebuild. I would really
Okay.
truly appreciate that.
Okay. Yeah, I would absolutely love that.
Thank you, Ingrid. I truly appreciate you on today. Everyone, this is Ingrid Dutton. I'm going to make sure all her information's here. So she's going to make sure she gets all of that to me and all the links. So do go over to her social media and do take a look at her podcast. We'll make sure that's on here as well. Thank you again, Ingrid. To everyone else, this is Teresa Aker from Success Diaries with Teresa Aker. I do hope you're having a great day. Do subscribe to my channel. I appreciate that. Have a great day, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Bye-bye now.